A stunning admission from within NATO has sparked fresh debate about Ukraine's future. Czech President Petr Pavel has publicly stated that Ukraine may have to accept the temporary occupation of its territory by Russia, not as recognition of defeat, but as a strategic compromise to ensure its survival as a sovereign state. Speaking to the BBC, Pavel said that Ukraine is currently incapable of liberating all Russian-held areas quickly, even with Western support, and attempting to do so would come with devastating losses. He said the West must avoid demanding what Ukraine simply cannot deliver in the near term.
It would be unfair for the West to pressure Ukraine to immediately liberate all the occupied territories. The priority is the preservation of the Ukrainian nation.
In perhaps the most controversial statement of the interview, Pavel made it clear that Ukraine's territorial integrity may have to be compromised temporarily, not in principle, but in practice, if that's what it takes to avoid collapse.
We want Ukraine to survive as an independent sovereign country. If the price of its survival is that part of its territory is temporarily occupied, then so be it. We will never legally recognize these occupied territories as Russian.
Pavel said these occupied territories are being used by Moscow as bargaining chips, not out of genuine care for the people living there. He described them as political pawns, with their residents facing discrimination and neglect under Russian control.
These territories are merely a political tool for Russia, and their inhabitants are second-class citizens for Moscow.
The Czech leader also warned of a bigger threat looming: Western military fatigue. If weapons and funding begin to dry up, Pavel believes Ukraine may have no choice but to pause the war in order to regroup and prepare for a longer struggle.
If support from the West diminishes, Ukraine may have to make some compromises to gain time for economic and military recovery.
Rather than focus solely on battlefield victories, Pavel is urging the West to double down on economic warfare. He believes that financial pressure will ultimately force the Kremlin to negotiate, something Moscow has refused to do under current conditions.
It is in the interest of those on both sides of the Atlantic to put much more economic pressure on Russia. Given the state of the Russian economy, they would not be able to remain under such pressure for long. Therefore, sooner or later, if these measures are applied, Russia will have no choice but to come to the table and negotiate, which it has so far refused to do.
Looking further ahead, Pavel said, Ukraine's long-term strength lies not just in weapons, but in rebuilding, reform, and European integration. He believes that once Ukraine becomes part of the EU, its economic and civil freedoms will draw back even those regions currently under Russian control.
If Ukraine becomes a member of the European Union, joins the single European market, and undergoes reconstruction after the war ends, the residents of the occupied territories will realize that they would be much better off in Ukraine than in Russia.
President Petr Pavel's remarks underscore a growing realism or resignation within parts of NATO. His vision is not one of total victory, but strategic survival. It's a bitter pill for Kyiv, but one that some in Europe may soon see as necessary if Ukraine is to live to fight another day.